it might not be the same. Okay. It might not be the same people. What I'm concerned about is that it might not be the same people working on the same things. So, for example, in my second point, so in 2B, I link to an issue that it's called restructure merge request merge widget. And that is basically would be the changes, like the smallest changes that we can do to the UX that I think will have the biggest impact for sure. And I'm talking with Phil there because he was the first person that came to mind. But I don't know if it's going to be Phil that is going to be working on that. So whoever is working on re-architecting the merge requests mergeability widget, I think it needs to be the same person also doing the UX, or else, because the most important thing is keeping both things aligned and knowing when there could be collisions and when there are dependencies, and to reduce the communication overhead and make things as efficient as possible, I think it should be the same engineers doing both things. Um, so that's my only concern. I mean, if we can't do it with the same engineers, I think we will have communication overhead and potentially things will collide. But that's my only concern.
Yeah, so I guess that sort of is, I'm less concerned about the person. I guess my point is more that if you look at like restructuring the MR merge widget, right, that could, my concern is that what we're about to do, if you look at the re-architecting the MR widget, is someone is trying to dictate a data model based on what they know today's world looks like, and design like an API and a data structure and how all of that's going to happen. And then we're going to come in starting in a couple milestones and go, well, this is what the new world looks like. And if that data model and data structure doesn't line up anymore, we're just throwing away sort of all of the work for sort of no good reason, right? Like we really shouldn't be, to me, we really shouldn't be doing this re-architecting. And I get that it solves like a short-term pain. Like we have a pain right now. We've also had that pain for a very long time. And we are very nearly to a point where we can say, this is what the new world looks like, and this is what we want. This is the things we need to be able to cover and do as part of that user experience. And so the model needs to be able to like cover and deal with all of those things versus dealing whatever it can deal with today. And maybe it would be an additive action, but if it's not an additive action, then we've sort of like, we're just wasting time right now. And I think my biggest, I'd rather us, if this was anything else, right? If we were driving the re-architecting, and again, I think like this is sort of a problem that another group is trying to drive this, but if we were driving the re-architecting, it'd be the same way we do anything else, right? We would start with designs and we would say, hey, engineers, here's what the in-state user experience is. This is what the designs are for this. How should we do this? Right? That's how we would do this. And we're about to go down that path with the restructuring of the MR widget, which will likely lead us into like, hey, we should redo all these other things, but we should be redoing them all in the context of where we want to end up, not redoing them all so we can redo them all again.
Yeah, one thing I would add here is that although this issue has been open on Verify, CARE's involvement is exactly so that we can take a driver's seat approach here and we can dictate more of the changes being done exactly to support our vision for longer term. And
engineering doesn't have that vision. Engineering has not like seen anything of Pedro's new work outside of the one issue that Bill has.
Right. And I think taking a step back is like, we don't know exactly what the states are going to be, but we do know that we want a very reliable and robust single source of truth for the state representation. And that's what the proposals that have been discussed on the engineering side have been so far, is how can we make this representation of state more reliable and more robust, and not have the state on the back end thinking it's one thing and then the front end thinks it's another thing, regardless of what the individual states they are and how they're represented on the UI. That's where I think this effort is focusing on, is establishing a baseline of the representation of states and make sure that backend and frontend are aligned and they have a single source of truth. I don't think nobody is proposing updating any of the logic in terms of which states we have or how they're represented on the UI, because we're waiting for guidance on that. But I think it's fair to assume that we will have to represent the state of the merge request, how it is, and have messages and UI react to each state. The question we have right now is that we have such a mess on the code that for us to implement any vision that Pedro has, then coming back to Pedro's point, I do think this has to be done regardless. Anyways, it has to be done anyway for us to start implementing anything. But I can also see your point that if we had a better vision of the endpoint, we could totally prepare the architecture better for the end result. But the thing is, again, the pressure comes with the bugs we're facing and the lack of reliable way to debug these problems today. And that's the problem that is kind of forcing our hand. And instead of just stopping everything altogether, we thought, and the team thought, that we can start cleaning up the act of state representation, make that reliable so that whatever comes next, we're able to reliably represent it and to work with it. So that's kind of like the idea behind it. But I think we're missing Michelle here. There's a lot of things that happen out of my radar since we had that call that I think it would be important to get Michelle's feedback here. So maybe we can table this and come back to this next week.
I mean, I imagine by next week, it's possible some of this work is going to be trying to get into 13.11.
Oh, right.
And I think we just need to be very clear on like.
Okay, so maybe we can have a call when Michelle is back. Maybe, perhaps, hopefully, hope she's better at the end of the week. We can have a call just about this topic. I'm happy to jump on a call quickly and discuss this on a case-by-case basis and discuss it properly. Because I feel like we miss her point, her perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to say that I know that Fabio, who is working on that, he's assigned to that. He's the senior backend engineer for CI. I know he's aware of the mapping that I did of the current states and also the design exploration. I actually involved him to make sure he validated everything, or that he was like felt that he can give feedback. And I'm having an ongoing discussion with him in that issue of re-architecting, because he wants me to validate that like this structure is this aligned with what you were seeing. And I don't think, in all honesty, I don't think the current structure of how we present the mergeability checks, so why the merge button is disabled, why you can't merge, I don't think that's going to change, because it's the ideal UX, as I wrote there, is also like the most simple and basic thing. Like, this is why you can't merge, and this is what you can do to unblock it. So it's the information of the why and the what you can do. And I think that's what, from what I've seen, that's what he and the other engineers are trying to follow with that data structure. I have a few questions there about how exactly this is going to be in practice. So this is an ongoing discussion. So this is just to say that, to Kai, that they are aware. I'm not sure how deep they are, but it seems like they're aware and they're taking things into account. I don't know what is the priority of this. So I could see, as Andre was saying, I think this is something that could be worked in parallel, but I don't know what's the priority and if this is something that we can postpone to after other changes in the UI have been made. Not my call.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, and honestly, that most recent discussion is sort of what's concerning to me, in that if you look at that, what you presented back was really what the UI should say is, here are 3 reasons why you can't merge when there are 3 reasons you can't merge. And the UI doesn't actually do that today. So what we're trying to tell him now is design the data structure for a future model of a UI that doesn't exist yet, but we're not also worrying about that. And I think that's where my concern is, right? Like if you have that conversation and you cross those paths and you say, design a data model for the UI that doesn't exist yet, that's a little bit of a problem because we don't know that that's the right thing or the right way we want to consume that data. If you design for today's data, which is we only show you one thing that can block your merge request, but that's not where we want to be in 3 months when we, or 2 months or next month or whenever we start working on this, then like that data model's bad. And now we have to redo that too. And that's my point, is like, it matters what the end state is tremendously here, because what we're gonna ask them to build, and I agree, this re-architecting has to happen, but we should be very thoughtful about doing it so that we end up where we want to end up, and not just doing it to do it now.
And supports what Pedro wants to build. So that it supports what Pedro wants to build. I get it. I get your point. If I can add a little bit of an example, right now we have random properties sprinkled all over the response, right? And by unifying that into one representation, will be easily later. So your example, so we have one on his proposal, which is just very drafty. He has one allowed merge strategy. If we want to support more, we could only iterate that towards having multiple. But I can also think about a ton of ways that this can go wrong, and we have to go back to square one. So yeah, let's bring Michelle over and discuss this on a call specifically for 1311 if you want to get started right away or not. Because right now I feel like we're missing an important part of this conversation, which is the backend architecture and how, whether we can take, so what kind of initial steps are we thinking? Because that's, I don't know what they're thinking exactly. And some of them might be totally harmless, although other ones might be a little bit more committing. So we would have to know a little bit more what's in their minds. And right now, I don't know. I don't have a visibility of that. I'll ping Michelle and we'll schedule that once she's back. Cool. Can we move on, I guess? Pedro, take it away.
All right. So yesterday in the UX Sync, and after digesting the amazing feedback that the whole team left in that issue about updating the dropdown to distinguish between incomplete and complete reviews, and the proposal that I had there, me and Kai, we felt that the proposal is in a good enough state, and I mean, there was no big concern about anything in specific, that we can move forward with this. And yeah, we would like to engineering to own the breakdown of the work instead of being me dictating like, this is what we do first, and this is the size of the scope or whatever it is, just to take that proposal and the end goal and try to break it up within the constraints that we have, and also investigate the constraints, right? We have the filter, which would be a new filter, is, does this work? What is the required work? And also all of the other aspects. And of course, I would be there to support them, because this is not just the technical side, but if we know the technical pieces and how engineers feel most comfortable investigating and breaking it down, it will be much easier to then reorder things in terms of how we can release them and how we can experiment and learn from these small iterations. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a bit in the open, but I'm stopping there for questions.
I'll add that I'm still trying to catch up with the whole thread and all the discussions, and I'm still trying to make up my mind how I feel about this myself. Because like you said, like this is not a slam dunk that it's as obvious as we first thought. I'm okay in the engineering owning the breaking down of things, so I'm okay with that. From the looks of it, it feels like we're leaning towards having a filter for waiting for. The building of the UI for the sidebar is what concerns me a bit more, and that's why I haven't even published anything there, because there's a lot of moving parts here. The assignees, for example, it's owned by another group, and it's a different code base. So if we have to support the waiting for assignees, that doesn't make sense for issues. So we have to find a way to only have that enabled for merge requests, and so it's a tricky ground, because they're also refactoring the assignees widget at this point. So there's a lot of moving parts to account for, and I want to make sure that we have a visibility of the runway ahead of us. And perhaps I think that's what you're asking. That's what you're asking, is for us to look into the blockers.
What you were just saying is like one of the things. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, we'll totally take up your request and try to break it down for iterative steps that we can push things forward meaningfully. Do you think even if that concept only exists for review, no, actually, then you have to toggle the authors to actually have the whole flow work. Yeah, let me dive deep onto this. I've dabbled on it. I've taken a look at it, opened the VS Code here and there, but it's so many things flying. But yes, engineering will help break down the steps and make this iterative approach to improving this situation, for sure.
Yeah, I think the point is sort of that, one of the things that we've heard is like engineering wants to be involved much earlier in the process and like get that say in sort of like what can work and what can't work. And so this was like a good one that Pedro defined an end state. Like we have now an end state defined. Here's what the user experience should look like. Here's what the UI should roughly look like. And now there's not much else for like Pedro to go do other than maybe some like tweaks to the UI once some things get in practice. And there's not really much else for like me to do, because we sort of address this is the problem we want to solve, and this is what our proposal is to do that, right? And engineering has asked for this, and so this is a good one that is well defined, but is large enough that it will require multiple backend issues and multiple front-end issues. And I will say the other thing is, what I don't want is one feature flag to control however many issues of work this is. What I'd like to see is like waiting for you gets added as a filter, and that gets added to it as a filter sort of by itself, right? And that's an issue that could ship, and like whether or not the rest of this stuff is built and you could even use waiting for you, who cares? Like it just exists as a filter. And like all of these pieces, that's sort of the other push we want for engineering, is like, how do we ship all of this without all the next 3 milestones worth of work sitting on one terrifying feature flag that then when we turn it on, we all go, oh, we don't really like it, and let's turn it off and like add 5 more features before we like try and turn it on again. And this is really like a push from me to sort of like, this is what you've asked for. You go and do it, and let's see how this works and where we can like fix this for the next one that we experiment with. And so it is going to feel probably more uncomfortable than most stuff we do, but that's I would say it is by my ask and design that we make it feel more uncomfortable for engineering, and we give you the opportunity to go and sort of figure this out and come back and do it.
Yep, that makes sense. It's exciting as well, comfortable and exciting. We've all been feeling the pains of like the gaps, and just today we had people on the channel asking for clarification of a feature because it's not super clear. So we definitely want to get this in shape. And yes, we'll gladly break it down and try to find a way forward. I think there's a couple of more unknowns on the front end just because of that crossover to another plan, but I'll sync up with Michelle and we'll try to come up with a plan for rolling this out.
Do you think it makes sense to schedule a specific issue to investigate this in a 1311?
My idea is to start scheduling issues for 1311. So hopefully over the next couple of days, we'll be able to clarify the road ahead. and we'll be able
Right.
to schedule at least one issue for front end and one for back end for 13.11 at least. Whether that's a spike or an actual issue, I hope that it's an actual issue. We can do the spike before the starting of the milestone.
So an important thing is that I personally don't, and at Kai's point, I don't want to schedule one issue. I want to, as much as possible, to know everything. And I want the team to say, like, these are all of the steps. These are the ones that we know exactly what needs to be done. These are the ones that we already know that have unknowns, and that we can reorder things.
My idea is to create a sub epic or something and come up with all the steps that we envision already. What I was saying about scheduling one issue is that we'll start with scheduling those 2 issues, but we'll already have the visibility ahead, maybe even more than 2, depending on the size. So I'll be completely clear and transparent. My biggest question right here is whether we can clearly and easily implement this waiting for across assignees and reviewers. That's my biggest question. And what will that entail? Whether we're blocked by their refactor or not, and what that means for timelines. That's my biggest question. Once we clarify that, we can easily turn this into issues.
Okay.
We'll do that over the next couple of days so we're ready for 13.11. Thanks for the push. We appreciate it.
Sorry for it being last minute, but all right. Last one up is just OKR planning. I mentioned it in Slack yesterday. It was a collective. We've all done a bang up job. Like, I also didn't do anything for this issue other than create it originally. I'm going to post some stuff back, I think, in sort of the product issue, just to originally say we participated. I said I'll do that at the end of the day. So if Pedro and Andre, if you've got some time today, great. If not, and it's tomorrow or by the end of the week or whatever, I think at this point it's already late. So we can get something in, we can get something in. But feel free to add to that issue, and I'll try and get it wrapped up in the next day or so.
On that issue, very quickly, are we supposed to involve quality as well? The quad planning of things, or is it just the 3 of us? So the 4 of us. I don't want to make it.
In theory, we should also like incorporate. Yes, it's supposed to be across all stable counterparts. I'm content with just keeping it to the 3 for now and not trying to like broaden the scope. And we don't plan as a quad, and so like I'm not sure doing OKRs as a quad is like very valuable for us either.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Maybe as an FYI, we can share what we found, and if they have anything to add, we can tweak it. But yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. We'll take a look at it.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Sorry for starting the recording late, but we'll at least get some of the conversation to Michelle, and then we'll try and get something else on the book. So
absolutely. Great to see you all. Bye.